home with me, the Accidental Country Pastor. I collected a whole bunch of acorns that were out on the rail trail, and as I was doing it, of course, I was looking for ones that were perfect, that had a little cap on it and all. But as I was going through the acorns, I did notice this one acorn that was already a wreck. It was kind of cracked open. And I picked it up. For some reason, it just really captured my attention. I don't know if you can really see it there. It captured my attention because I remember a 19th century, I believe it was 19th century evangelist, female writer, Hannah Whitehall Smith. She wrote a couple of books. I have one of them. I remember telling you a story about a year ago around All Saints Day about my German Swiss aunt, Tante Frieda, we called her Aunt Frieda, and how she gave me a whole bunch of books that really, really spoke to me and really introduced me to God. And in a way, they saved my life. Among her books that she gave me, these devotional books, was one by Hannah Whitehall Smith. And so when I was gathering up the acorns today, and I just was captivated by this one that was broken open, I remember Hannah Whitehall Smith writing, "Before the acorn can bring forth a great oak, it must itself become a wreck. No plant ever came from any but a wrecked seed." Before a great oak can come forth from an acorn, it must be cracked open. It must become a wrecked seed. And today I was thinking a lot about our brokenness and how the wreckage in our lives can indeed be redemptive. How the wreckage in our hearts, the wreckage of our hearts, can indeed bring forth something great. And so welcome to worship here at Old Stonewell Farm as we delve into God's Word and we take a moment to breathe in deeply and to pray to God, "Come, speak to me, O Lord, for your servant is listening." So my friends, let us begin to explore how God is making something great and mighty in the wreckage of our lives, and what we need to do in order to be part of the redemption, the goodness, the grace, what we need to do in order to glorify God when times are just tough. My friends, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers and sisters, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. For all of us makes many mistakes. Anyone who makes no mistakes in speaking is perfect, able to keep the whole body in check with a bridle. If we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we guide their whole bodies. Or look at ships. Though they are so large that it takes strong winds to drive them, yet they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great exploits. How great a forest is set ablaze by a small fire. And the tongue is a fire. The tongue is placed among our members as a world of iniquity. It stains the whole body, sets on fire the cycle of nature, and is itself set on fire by hell. For every species of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed and has been tamed by the human species. But no one can tame the tongue, a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse those who are made in the likeness of God.
I remember saying about an oak tree that I came across a few years ago, and I'm going to be paraphrasing it, But it says the strongest of the oak trees is not the one that is in the forest, protected from the elements, protected from the strong winds, protected from the searing sun. Rather, the strongest of oaks, well, the strongest of oak trees, they're the ones that are standing tall and mighty with a lot of strength and wisdom out in the open, where the winds hurl at them, where the sun beats down on them. The strongest of oaks is the one that still stands out in the open without any protection. Isn't that the same for us, that our strength is often born not out of being isolated and protected, but our strength is often born out of adversity, out of challenges, out of horrific things that happen to us. We have a choice. We have a choice to crumble or a choice to be melded by whatever adversity hits us and choose to be strengthened by it. It is a really tough weekend for me here at the farm, as it is for many of those in our nation, as we have approached the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And for so many people, it is a moment to pause, and we hear the phrase, "We will never forget," or "We cannot forget, let us remember." But for some reason, the 20 years that have gone by have really struck me on a deeper note, not just because of the horrific things that have happened 20 years ago and how has it formed us, but I found myself thinking 20 years that I've been gifted with life when others had their life taken away that day. 20 years have gone by and I've been able to live those 20 years. And so I've been reflecting a lot on how I have lived them. Have I really glorified God? Have I made the most out of the time that I had been given? And so I was reflecting a lot about the time that I've had, the 20 years that had passed, and how have I used that time when others did not get the chance to have any more time. But I think what really struck me this weekend, this anniversary, is not just the fact that we say, we will not forget and, pause and to remember the lives that have been lost. But I think the overwhelming sadness that I feel with this 20th anniversary, the sadness is coming from the fact that I feel as if we are no better today than we were 20 years ago. 20 years have gone by. What have we done? How have we lived? How have we glorified God? 20 years now. 20 years. And I feel our nation, I feel we as a society, we as people, we are just further away from being kind to one another than we were back then. I can't help it, but every time the anniversary of 9/11 comes around, I do gravitate towards the specials on TV, the documentaries. And the other night I was listening to one such documentary, and I was really struck by the interviews of those who survived 9/11. And I was really struck by the mentions of God and angels and how there was something there helping them. There was some heavenly divine intervention, even in the midst of a horrific event. Mentions of God, mentions of angels, mentions of how that day people were kind to one another, people were reaching out to help one another. And I thought about it. Where are we today? We have lost more people to COVID-19 than we had that day on 9/11, 2001. We have lost more people to COVID, and the numbers are going up. Why? Well, I don't want to get into any politics, but we know that there hasn't been really a lot of a surge in or support around getting vaccinated. And we know all too well, without getting political, we know all too well that there are just debates and arguments and just a lot of nastiness when it comes to the simple act of caring for another by wearing a mask. No, I don't want to get into the politics of the pandemic, but 20 years has gone by since we lost so many people in 9/11. 20 years has gone by since terrorism hit our nation right here where we are. And it hasn't changed us for the better. And so I have to ask the question, what is it going to take for us to have our hearts really cracked open so that something mighty and righteous can grow? Just like a little acorn seed can bear fruits and can just bear fruits to make a big oak grow. Then what is it going to take? I find myself asking, what is it going to take, oh Lord, to have a wrecked seed in our life really bear something great and mighty love that would glorify God, that would show respect to one another. The greatest law that Jesus gave us was a mandate to love one another. And 20 years has gone by, and I reflect on how it seems that loving one another, well, it just didn't take roots. Our scripture from James, it's one that I've always embraced. It's always been a reminder for me. How do I, show love to others with the words that I speak? And James comes to us with a warning saying our tongues are small members of the body, but our tongues can do so much damage. And so I wonder, as we have hit that 20th anniversary of 9/11, I wonder what words have come out of our mouth, words of love, or have our tongues done more damage with words of hate, fear of others, get revenge, hate those who don't look like us, be fearful of those who don't look like us. After 9/11, there was a lot of anti-Muslim rhetoric. It's been a hard time here at Old Stonewall Farm for me, as I find myself walking more slowly, pondering a little bit more deeply. And then when I pick through the acorns and I see a cracked one, a wrecked one, maybe that's why I picked it up. Maybe that's why I held on to it. Because I'm wondering, what is it going to take for us to really bear fruits, bear forth, become mighty oaks that glorify God? What is it going to take to break open our hearts to really love? And if our hearts are broken open, if you have found that your heart is aching, well, then what is God trying to show you in terms of redeeming that aching, in terms of redeeming that wreckage? When I was doing my research on acorns, what they mean, it turns out that a lot of the folklore and symbolism of plants, of trees and flowers, a lot of it comes from the Celtic tradition. And of course, the acorn means wisdom or long life, because it does grow into a big and mighty oak that can stand for many, many, many years. So the wisdom and the strength. But beyond the Celtic symbolism, beyond some of the pagan symbolism, I was on a search for some Christian meaning when it comes to the acorn that I was gathering on the trail. And it turns out in my research, I discovered that oak, the same root in Hebrew that is used for oak, is the same root in Hebrew that is used for God, El. So the Hebrew root, El, also is used for God, and the Hebrew root El is also used for the word oak. And it means mighty, strong, strength. So God is mighty, strong, and from God we get our strength. The oak grows mighty and strong. But it starts with a wrecked little acorn. That's how it can grow strong, when it is broken open. So how do we take the pain in our life? How do we take the wreckage in our life and ask God to redeem it so that something strong and mighty can grow? 20 years has gone by since incredible wreckage happened for so many people, for our nation. But what has grown from that? I don't see a mighty tree standing tall with love. Rather, I hear the scripture from James and I realize 20 years has gone by and our tongues have just kept flapping with negativity, with nastiness, with hate, with revenge. When we say, remember what happened on 9/11, I have a question that I want to ask everybody. What do you choose to remember? When we say remember, do we choose to remember the carnage? Do we choose to remember the horrific scenes? Do we choose to remember how another person hated us so much to wreak such havoc? Do we choose to remember the negative, the horrible, the painful? When I hear people say, remember 9/11, I hope that we remember the God moments that were there. I hope we remember that that was a day. The color of one's skin didn't matter, but that black, white, all helped one another. I hope we remember how for a brief moment in our lives, we actually listened and were kind to one another. We cried together. We held each other in prayer. For one brief moment, there were heroes. There were saints. For one brief moment, people actually turned their eyes to God, actually called out God's name for help. I think we have forgotten that. And so on this 20th anniversary, I want us to remember how we loved for one brief moment 20 years ago. How we loved and showed compassion as our hearts were breaking. And now as we go forward, how can we redeem these past 20 years in which we seem to have gone off kilter? Redeem these 20 years. How can we move forward remembering that we are all on this planet together? We are all in this crazy life together. And that there really is no time. No time for our tongues to be wagging with hate, with gossip, with negativity. It is time to really care for one another. It is time to really let a wrecked seed, the wrecked seed of our lives, grow into something mighty and strong. This morning, as I went out for my run, my neighbor's cows were out in the pasture, and it was around 8:40 in the morning, 8:40. I don't have my my Apple Watch anymore. It broke. So usually that calculates how long I run. But now that I don't have it anymore, I'm not sure if I'm going to get another one. It's kind of nice not having, email notices going off all the time on my wrist. So since I don't have it anymore, I take a look at what time it is when I'm about to start, so I know how long that I have run on the trail. So I did take a look at my phone and the clock, and it was 8:40. And of course, I knew the time of the first plane that hit the Trade Center, and it was on my mind. It was such a beautiful morning, just like it was 20 years ago. Sunny and crisp fall in the air. So the cows were out in the pasture, and I walked over to the cows and I decided to film them because you haven't seen the cows in a while. And in the quietness of a Vermont morning, in the peacefulness of the pastures, as I filmed the cows, all of a sudden I heard the rumbling of a plane flying over. Now, we don't get many planes flying over around here. And it just felt so surreal as I stood there filming the cow in a peaceful place where God has led me. 20 years ago, I was still living in Manhattan. 20 years ago, I wasn't even a pastor. I was just trying to figure out things. Never would I have thought I'd be standing in Vermont filming cows 20 years later. So as I filmed and I heard the rumble of the plane go over, I just kept filming. And when I played back that video, I found something very powerful. Looking at the peacefulness of the cow's eyes, standing in a pasture, sun shining, chill to the air, and then a plane going over. It made me pause, and it made me more prayerful. And as I began to run, that's when I kept thinking, what is it that we choose to remember 20 years later? We need to remember how we actually showed up and loved one another. We need to remember because we need to show up today and begin loving one another. Thanks be to God. As we often end our time together here at the farm with just a closing song, a time to really reflect on what we just discussed, a time to just breathe and to be in prayerful contemplation. Well, I want us to begin this time together with just me letting you know that I'm going to share with you the video of the cows and the plane flying over, and just a moment of silence. And then we're going to light this candle. And I invite you to really then reflect on the 20 years that have gone by, what you have done with those years. How has that time been spent glorifying God? And then turn to God. Turn to God and offer the wreckage in your life, the brokenness. Offer the wreckage still in this world, the brokenness still in our country. Offer it to God. And be bold in your prayers and ask God from the wreckage, from the brokenness. May something beautiful emerge. And as the psalmist says, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord. Let the words of my mouth be acceptable to you. May we go forth this day and for the next 20 years with words that are glorifying God, and the words that we speak actually be words that tell the world of the love of a great and mighty God.